Okay, so it's time for another episode of A Critic's Journey, and of course, the big thing for all of us film critics this week was heading along to check out the media screening and Australian premiere of Top Gun Maverick. So, of course, the day before I went to see Top Gun Maverick, I sat down to watch Top Gun, a movie that when I was a teenager, I reckon I probably watched 10 times a year. I absolutely was in love with this film. It was one of the first VHSs that I ever owned. It was one of the first CDs that I ever bought, was the soundtrack. But I actually hadn't watched it for a couple of years because a housemate that I had at one time decided to steal my copy of Top Gun, and I actually hadn't got around to buying another copy. So until it came out on Paramount Plus, I actually hadn't watched it for a while. So I sat down this week to watch a film that I knew that I had adored as a kid and a teenager. I mean, the film came out when I was 7 years old, so yeah, I would have been watching it before I was a teenager. And I've got to say, it holds up. You might remember when I went back and watched Cocktail, I said that it was a film that hadn't aged well. Well, Top Gun has aged well. There's nothing in this movie where you kind of sit there and cringe because you think, oh, that's so 80s. I mean, I guess the soundtrack could be called 80s, but it still holds up. Even the fashion and everything in this film holds up. The story especially holds up, and it's an interesting story. For those that haven't watched it, basically it centers around a pilot called Maverick, played by Tom Cruise, and his best buddy Goose, played by Anthony Edwards, and they're a great duo. They're a great team when it comes to fighting fighter jets, but Maverick's just got this kind of rebellious nature about him that kind of always sees him in trouble with the brass. So when he gets invited to this Top Gun Academy where the best of the best go, he kind of instantly clashes with Iceman, played by Val Kilmer, who is his direct rival. Sorry, I'm still getting over COVID, so there's going to be a couple of coughs as I record. So there's a kind of a clash there straight away. But both of them are vying for the top honor of being the best pilot at Top Gun. At the same stage, Maverick also meets Charlie, played by Kelly McGillis, who is very interested in the fact that Maverick is one of the only fighter pilots that's come up against these MiG jets. And she feels that she knows everything about these MiG jets, but Maverick says, having been in a dogfight with one, there's things that she doesn't know that she probably should know. Yeah, so story-wise, a lot of people will point out it's very much like An Officer and a Gentleman in the style, in the basic storyline. But the storyline is basic. Like, I don't just use the term basic storyline lightly. It is a very, very basic storyline, but it's one that holds your attention. And because of the amazing visuals that Tony Scott, the director, and his cinematographer are able to get, it's a film that just absolutely encaptures you as an audience. You can't help but be drawn to this film. Now, we are lucky that this film ended up looking the way that it did. Tom Cruise, for a long time, had refused Jerry Bruckheimer's invite to come along and be part of the film. In fact, they looked at so many different people because Tom Cruise was saying no to the film that this could have ended up being a very, very different film, which would have been a shame because this is a film that changed cinema forever. The visuals and everything in this film showed that action films could be shot in an entirely different way. It basically launched home entertainment with VHS. It was one of those films that was one of the first ones that kind of everybody wanted to have. So it launched a whole great big new thing for VHS. But going back to what I said about this film could have looked very different. It could have not had Tom Cruise. It could have not have Tony Scott. There were so many people that Jerry Bruckheimer spoke to about this film. And there was a lot of people that said no to this film. It was interesting doing a little bit of research into this film before I did this podcast and finding that a substantial amount of people, including some actresses that were approached to playing Charlie, said no to this film because they thought it promoted war and was kind of a Cold War apologist film. So this could have been a very, very different film with a very, very different cast, which, yeah, is surprising, because I think if you thought of Top Gun without Tony Scott and Top Gun without Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer, I don't think this film would ever have become the film that it did. I think the performances in this film are fantastic, and it's interesting because I went along a few years ago to a special event that was held by Supernova where they brought Val Kilmer to Australia, and when he was kind of talking about these films, you kind of picked up that the guy's got a little bit of an ego. So going back and watching the film now, it's kind of funny that you do actually kind of feel for Iceman as a character. He's written in kind of a way where, yes, he's a rival to Maverick, but if you actually watch the film and read between the lines, you can tell that he, in a one way, wants to help Maverick become a better pilot and person as well. And to the point where I think he is one of the most important characters in the brand new Top Gun film. I can say that now, I've seen it. But the performances are fantastic. I mean, we go back and watch Top Gun now and you think, oh, wow, it featured one of the biggest stars in the world, Tom Cruise. Well, back then he wasn't. He was an up-and-coming star. I talked about Top Gun changing the way action films was shot. Top Gun was probably the film that catapulted Tom Cruise into that next kind of stratosphere, as well, as a big name actor that could deliver big films. So look, go back and watch Top Gun if you haven't watched it for a while. It is well and truly worth it. The amazing visuals of this film just make it something special. Stunning soundtrack, absolutely perfect soundtrack. I think everybody right around the world knows Kenny Loggins' title track, Danger Zone. It is just an amazing soundtrack, one of the best soundtracks ever, and not surprising, this is also one of the best movies ever. So yes, I've gone back and watched it after not watching it for years and years and years, and I've got to say this is still a 5-star movie from me.